We are finally at that slightly fun part of the renovation where it's time to put all the architraves and skirtings back on. It's going to be a little bit complicated because the walls have been replastered, so I'm going to show you my approach to dealing with that sort of situation. Hiya folks, welcome back to the show and our 1920s renovation project. Now this is a problem that you are going to run into if you ever do a renovation on an older property. If you've had to have the walls replastered, which we have had to do because the walls were in such a state, and also if you've had rewiring done or anything like that, you're almost certainly going to need replastering done. And you've really got a couple of options when it comes to the replastering. I'm going to film this in two parts because it's going to get quite long otherwise. So part one will be the architraves, part two will be the skirtings, or baseboards as you refer to them across the pond. Now just to very quickly interject and explain what skirtings and architraves are. If you imagine you've got a wall in a house, not a very straight wall, but you get the idea, but in that wall you've got a doorway. So in a UK house, this will very typically be made out of brick or block or whatever. Sometimes it's timber, you know, sometimes you'll have hollow walls, but it's very common in UK houses that this will be a brick wall. You then have the door liner or door frame that kind of comes up the inside of that gap, more or less like that, and that is held with fixings into the brick wall. It's the door frame that supports all of your hinges and whatnot, that actually does kind of the structural support of supporting the door. And then obviously you need to deal with the fact that over here you've got what's probably going to be a plastered wall, and here you've got a timber door frame. And wherever you have plaster butting up to timber, you have to disguise that joint in some sort of way. You're always going to get cracks between plaster and timber because of the timber expanding and contracting. So what we do is we put what's known as an architrave over that gap, rebaited back very slightly from the edge of the door frame, normally rebaited back about 5mm or 1/4 of an inch or thereabouts, mitered at the top. Oh my God, what am I doing? Please don't judge. Mitered at the top. Oh man, why didn't I just use a ruler? Mitered at there and there. Anyway, that disguises the joint between the door frame and the wall, and then what we do is we butt the skirtings up to the architrave. So the architraves have to be in first, and then you put the skirtings in afterwards. In terms of the actual design of the skirtings and architraves that we're using, we're just using an ogee design, which it can be a little bit twee ogee because it gets used a lot in new builds and stuff like that. It used to all be Taurus. Everyone used to use Taurus architraves in the UK, but now it's over to ogee. But I think ogee looks pretty good for this style of house. You know, this is a 1920s, 1930s house. We're not in any period. It's not Victorian, it's not Edwardian. It's really interwar, verging on Art Deco, where Art Deco style starts coming in more in the 30s and stuff like that. But yeah, in 1920s you can get away with pretty much anything really. Ogee, by the way, the ogee style's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. The ogee just refers to the fact that it's got this, it gets known as like a serpentine, like an S. So if it's got this kind of S design in it like that, that's what kind of depicts the ogee style. So then we've just got, we've got this little feature that brings it out to the flat down there, and we've got this little feature, a little chamfer that brings it up to the flat at the top. But the ogee, as I say, really refers to this kind of S shape here. And again, in terms of the sizes that you're using, you just need to use sizes that are proportional to the size of your house. You know, if you've got tall ceilings, you can get away with bigger skirting boards, and if you've got bigger skirting boards, you can get away with slightly bigger architraves that kind of match in with the height of your skirting boards. If you have very tall skirtings and very skinny architraves, it'll look unusual. And likewise, if you have really fat architraves and really short skirtings, then equally that'll look weird as well. So we've got relatively high ceilings in this house. So we've got 2.6 metre ceilings, which is a little bit higher than normal. Most modern houses, some I've seen as short as 2.2 metre ceilings. 2.4 is more of a kind of standard, but 2.6 is quite tall. Not as high as ceilings that you get in Victorian houses where you can get away with really huge skirting boards that can have all sorts of intricate details in and whatnot. But for this, I'm using 144 millimetre skirtings and 69 mil. Why did I write it there? 69 millimetre Architraves, and the proportions just look good. It's just something that you need to kind of work out, try a few different styles and see what works for your particular property. So I'll just show you down here towards the bottom of this little section of wall here, because I can show you quite a lot of different things at the same time. So obviously if you're getting the walls re-plastered, you can just leave the skirtings and architraves on. The problem is that it's not really best practice, because it means that your plaster is going to potentially overlap the top of your skirting board and it looks a bit naff. So really you want to make life as easy as possible for the plasterers when they come along, and the best thing to do is to take off all of the skirtings and architraves. And to be honest, that makes life easier anyway, because you're probably going to have cables to run behind skirtings, and the architraves in this property weren't in the best state anyway. Now, the problem when it comes to putting all of your skirtings and architraves back on, and we're putting brand new skirtings and architraves back on, the problem that you will run into is that now your wall is thicker than it was before. So obviously when it comes to fitting your architrave, if you've got the wall further out than your door frame, then you're going to run into a problem, because if you've got the architrave pressed flat to the wall, you can see we've got a giant gap there, and if you have it pressed close to the door frame, you can see we've got a giant gap at the back. So one approach is to chisel away the plasterwork, which yeah, that ain't happening. So the best thing to do really in this situation is to fit a trim piece, effectively extending the edge of your door frame, and then we'll put the architrave over the top of that, and that will make life much easier and it'll look much better. Now, the next thing to consider, it's not very bright here, let's move somewhere a little bit brighter. So, the next thing to consider is, whenever you join two pieces of wood together like this, you're always going to see the join, you're always going to see a line down that edge. I mean, you could filler it, but you're going to be there forever and a day fillering all of these little joins. And one of the reasons that we step the architrave back is so that you don't have to deal with a join like that. So wherever you've got a join like that, you're better to create a feature out of it by creating a little, like a step back, kind of like that, rather than trying to match up to the edge of things. I mean, there's other reasons that we step back the architrave as well, and to stop stuff binding on hinges and things. But my point is when you come to put this trim piece on, you've got the option of whether you want to try to match it to the frame, which is fine, but I think you're always going to see that join. And the other option is to just set it back a little bit so that you're making more of a kind of feature out of it. So then your next consideration is, well, what do you do with the architrave? Do you match the architrave to the trim like that, or do you also set back the architrave as well? And in this situation, I think I'm going to go for a double kind of setback detail on this, where we set back the trim and we set back the architrave. It depends, it's entirely up to you really whether or not you want to do that, but I think it's going to look better. The only problem is then you don't have very much meat of the door frame where you're attaching your architrave into, but it's going to be glued as well, so I'm not too concerned about that. The other reason that you're probably going to have to step back the trim piece is if you don't, let me just show you on the other side of this door, if you don't, there's a reasonable chance your trim is going to bind on the hinges. So if I was to put the trim piece flush to the edge of the door frame like that, where the door is going to hit the trim when the door opens. It depends on the sort of hinges you've got, but I have no intention of replacing all the hinges in this house. If you've got like Parliament hinges or something like that, that could potentially get around this problem, but yeah, for this, you're going to have to set back the trim so that the door doesn't bind on it. You'll see what I mean when I get started with this, but the first thing that we need to do is to get a nice fixing for these trim pieces to go into, because every one's going to be a slightly different width depending on the thickness of the plaster. And if there's plaster, for example here, running over the top of the door frame, that's going to have to be nibbled away. Same for, I mean, if we look around here in the kitchen, it was like this before we've done anything. This has only got like a very, very thin layer of skim on it. But you can see this is, the plasterwork's nearly an inch away from the door frame. So we're going to build this right out to the thickness of the plaster, then put the architrave over the top. It's a much better job doing it like that, rather than like chiseling away at your plasterwork or trying to fit an architrave into that gap. It'll just look awful. So first job, it's going to get a little bit messy. I just need to nibble away all of the plaster that's overlapping the door frames, and then I can make a whole load of filler strips on the table saw for going down and filling these gaps. As I say, they're all going to have to be slightly different thicknesses. There's really no easier way of doing it, but it'll look good once it's done. Let's crack on. So all the trims are in. I've just, this doesn't matter leaving it overshot like that because it'll be completely covered by the architrave. I've just used a multi-cutter to cut off the excess. I found that's quite an easy way of doing it. This one I'm just butting up to the wall because the section down here, it's so thin. By the time you've got the backing piece and the architrave, you'd only have like 5 mil of architrave or something down this gap, so that'll just get corked. I might put a little bead down or something, but it's really not worth putting an architrave down that edge. We'll head through to the hallway and I'll show you how I'm going about doing this whole section of the job. So first off, get my pieces of architrave and line it up. I'm just going to do this by eye because I've done it quite a lot, and over time you kind of get an eye for doing this, but I know that that's where I want the overlap to come to, so I'm just going to mark that on the architrave. If anything, give yourself like a little bit of room to play with. It doesn't need to be literally tight up against the floor, so if there's a millimetre or so gap away from the floor, that's fine. I would rather that than it's too tight. So I've just put a mark on there, and I'll just put a mark on there so that I know what direction I'm cutting the angle. Find another one. Same over here. Let's see. kind of there. Cut those on the miter saw. With cuts like this, I like to nibble my way up to the cut. Obviously, if you want to be a bit more safe, then use clamps and whatnot, but yeah. For the top, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to put the left-hand miter in, and then I will work towards the right, if that makes sense. So by doing it this way, when I've measured it up on the wall, I'm holding it with my left hand and I'm marking it with my right hand. If I'd done this cut first, I'd have to hold it with my right hand and mark it with my left hand, which is a little bit tricky because I'm right-handed. So let's do this one. This one's quite critical that you get this exactly right. That looks good. I'm just going to do a very quick dry test fit, but it looks good to me. Yep, that looks grand. So, next bit, I prefer to pre-assemble the joint using CA glue, an activator. You don't have to do it this way. You've kind of got three options. You can do it the CA glue and activator way. You can do wood glue, which obviously is not going to dry as quickly, but it gives you a bit more kind of movement time. So you could do wood glue in situ. So you could attach your left and right, put some wood glue on, and then bring your top down. But I think you get a better job, or you can just do no glue on the joint, but I think that's a bit bodgy. So I think it's easiest actually to do the miter bond. So make sure you've definitely got enough room to lay the whole thing out. I've just kind of followed the edge, and then some activator on this side. Make sure you're on a nice flat surface, and this goes off so quickly. You've got to be careful you don't glue it to the floor. Should probably be on a better surface, but 10 seconds or something and that'll be done. There we go. Now we'll do the other side. Give it a little move just to make sure you're not gluing it to the floor. I'm holding it together just while moving it around a little bit, just so I don't glue it to the floor. That's done. And then I'm going to put some adhesive on the wall. Doesn't need a huge amount. Get your nail gun ready. I'm using 18 gauge 35mm brads. And then it's just a question of offering up the whole thing to the frame. And it's this top edge that's critical, and then you can work your way down both legs. But if you work it that way, let's try and get that vaguely level. You know, it's an old house, so there's going to be compromises, and there's going to be bits that you just can't get 100% perfect, but you know, we'll do our best. So I'm just shooting for the 5mm on that side, and 5mm on that side will look good. Pop a pin in there, and also making sure we've got the overlap left to right. I'm just shuffling that along that way a tiny bit. That looks grand. Whoops. And then just going to work our way down both legs, just making sure the nice and level and straight. You can get spacers out and whatnot, but honestly I prefer doing this by eye. And there we go, another one done. I think it's much quicker pre-assembling it and doing the CA glue thing, and it's got a lovely joint at the top there as well, so I really do think that's the best way of doing it. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say, but that is all done. Obviously it's going to need caulked. I mean, we're in an old house. If you're on perfect walls and all that sort of thing, you can probably get away with less caulk, but for the best will in the world, you are going to have little bits where you're going to have to caulk it prior to painting. But that is one done. About 17 left to go. Right, I'll quickly show you the story so far so you can kind of see where we're shooting at and how much I've managed to get done in a day. So this is what will be the utility kind of area, and I can't remember, did I mention before, this one there's just not a big enough gap to run a an architrave down that edge, so that's just butted up at the top there. I still need to do around the back door here, but it's not urgent, that can wait. The big driver at the minute is because carpets are coming soon, so this needs to be done. The hallway is all done, so we've got the architraves for these 3 rooms. And it's worth noting as well, always try and make sure that if you've got 2 rooms next to each other like this, try and make sure that they're lined up. And then in the living room, we've got the living room one done. As I say again, this one, really there's not enough room to run an architrave down that edge, so that one is going to be butted up. There are a few like that, there's nothing you can do about it. And then we've got into the dining room, we've got the architraves around that door done. I've had to, this will look okay once it's done. Again, once it's all painted and tidied up, it looks a bit scrappy at the minute, but at the end of the day, there's a light switch in the road. There's not a huge amount you can do about that. And then I'll quickly show you what I've done upstairs. There's a lot of doorways upstairs. So we have got all the trims in, and every single one of these had to be a different size as well. So we've got the trims in for the toilet, for bedroom 1, and that's on both sides of the doors. Bedroom 2, the bathroom, bedroom 3. I had to do a little bit of jiggery-pokery around locks and whatnot, but I think once we've got the architrave over the top of that, it's going to look absolutely fine. Again, the plaster was sticking out a mile here, so we've got quite thick beads on this door, and then some of them are just, you know, there was almost nothing. Like here, it was so thin the plaster had just kind of fallen away off the door frame. But I've put some little 3mm beads on anyway, just mainly so it all matches. I don't want like some rooms where it doesn't have the double inset and then other rooms where it does. I think if you're gonna start doing that, you should do it everywhere. Bathroom, I haven't done on the inside yet because I will get the tiling done first and then I'll butt the architraves up to the tiles. So that's not too urgent. And then obviously we've got the bedrooms are all done on the inside. So we're pretty much ready for architraves to go on upstairs. I'm calling it a day at that. I've been on this for pretty much a day. It was a bit of a late start, but I'm starting to get tired. I'm at a good stopping point. I don't particularly want to start doing the architraves while I'm tired, because you do need to kind of think about it. There's going to be a lot of rip cuts and things to do on this one. So a lot of little rips down edges like that. That will get one down this edge here. Again, there's a couple where it butts up too tightly. This has never had an architrave down this edge, so that'll just butt up at the top there. And I think it's a similar story in here. No, this one's a little bit of a bigger gap in this room, so I can get, it's going to be tiny, like just a really thin little strip down there, but I think it'll look better. It's just you kind of get to the point where if there's only a really, really thin strip, it looks weirder than not having one at all. Anyway, so as I say, I'm getting tired. That's enough for one day, but just to give you a gauge of how much you can potentially get done in one day. I think another day, probably maybe half a day to finish off the architraves. Once this is all done, all the prep's done, it's relatively quick doing the final bits, but yeah, half a day to a day to do that. And then we've got all the skirting. There's a lot of skirting to do, so I'll come back to you. I'm not going to film putting all these architraves on because it's the same as what you've just seen. So I will come back to you once this is done and the magic architrave fairies have been, and then we're ready to start on the skirtings. And will you look at that, the magic architrave fairies have been. Let me give you a quick guided tour of what I've done here. First of all, fairly obvious here, there was a light switch here. Obviously, did I show you the light switch downstairs? Anyway, I had to kind of cut around the light switch in the dining room. There wasn't a huge amount I could do about that. Here, because it's like right in view, I didn't particularly want to do cutouts of the architrave here, so I've relocated that light switch over here, and that it makes sense anyway, because this is now the bathroom light and the hall light, and that'll be a loft light as well. So it made sense just to get rid of that light switch altogether. There was quite a lot of tricky little kind of scribey things and whatnot. I had to actually knock a little bit of the plaster away from the wall down this edge just so that I could get this one in. But mostly we're okay. I mean, you know, it's an old property. There's going to be cork, trust me, there's going to be cork involved on this. We've also got some oddities like here where this door frame, for whatever reason, is slightly higher than this door frame, but a centimetre higher. So I've just put a little angled detail on that. I can't even remember how it was done before. The previous architraves were much smaller than these, but I think these do look better. And then we've had to do two narrow kind of rips down that edge, just so that we've got some form of architrave down that side. and then we've got just normal architrave up on the left hand side of that one. It's all pretty self-explanatory really, I suppose. One of the main things that I try to do here is make sure again that these two are at exactly the same level, because that's the sort of thing that your eye gets drawn to. But you know, as I say, there's going to be cork involved in this, fear not. But when you're dealing with older houses like this, there's very little you can do about that. For all the scribing and delicate cutting, you know, your walls are going to be wavy and there's not going to be a right angle to deal with anywhere. Oh yeah, I'll quickly show you this. So I've done a little bit of the skirting, but we'll go into the skirting more next time. But you can see wherever the skirting ends, we've got a little return on it. Even with bedding out these edges, we've got quite big gaps down this edge, but that'll fill absolutely fine. If we didn't put the filler strip down this left-hand edge, it would look odd that this was like one of the only door frames that didn't have it. So I'd rather have the filler strip there, and then I can just fill that edge. You'll never even know once it's all done and painted. Through into the bedroom, probably the skinniest bit of architrave I've ever fitted, but it was just kind of on that borderline of, if it was any thinner than that, I wouldn't have bothered and I would have just ended that on the wall, kind of butted it up to the wall. But I think that once it's all painted, that's going to look pretty good there. Into the third bedroom as well, and you can see that double rebate detail that we've got, and again thin strip of architrave down that right hand side, and we're all generally quite good. What I've also tried to do as well, obviously not all of the door frames are perfectly level, we've talked about that in previous videos, but where a door frame is out, I've tried to kind of gently compensate for it on the architrave. Not too much, because if you do it too much, it'll draw your eye to it. But for example here, so I've got a slightly smaller gap at that side compared to that side. There's only a couple of mil in it, but it's enough to bring this closer to level, not 100% level, but closer to level, so that it doesn't look odd. And once this is all painted up, it'll look awesome. You'll not know. It'll look like just normal. As I say, I've started on the skirtings as well, but we're going to save that for the next video because there's a lot to cover off on the skirting board side of things. And by the way, 100% pre-assembling your architrave sets with CA glue is by far the easiest way of doing it. It really didn't take long. Probably took about a day all in to do all of the architraves. I mean, it was split across 2 days, but it was like 2 half days to do all of the architraves in the whole house. So, you know, day to 2 days, pessimistically, but the architraves are relatively easy in the scheme of things. So there you go, folks. Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you've got any other tips or anything like that for fitting architraves, then post them below as well. Join me in part 2 of this video, where we'll make a start on the skirtings. That's a much bigger job. See you next time. Take care, folks. Tatty bye.
Can I see you again? By your door, pick you up, it ain't a sad. Whoa, do it again sometime.